Synagogues, the venues of Jewish religious and community life, are outstanding parts of the architectural heritage of multinational cities in the Carpathian Basin. One could state unequivocally that these houses of prayer, hidden either in our city centers or in the suburbs, are among the undiscovered treasures of Hungary. The Jews have a long history here. To recount their story, we have to go back to Roman times. Our guide is Rudolf Klein, an architectural historian, professor at St. István University, doctor of the Hungarian Academy of Sciences, and visiting scholar at several universities around the world.
Few visitors to Budapest would guess that this is a city which has a Jewish history going back to Roman times. The first Jews arrived to the metropolitan area of Budapest in the 2nd century, probably as slaves and later as freemen. In this area, a couple of Jewish tombstones have been found, and this is a hard evidence for my statement. Our series is going to deal with synagogue architecture in historic Hungary, which is more or less the territory of the Roman province of Pannonia.
King David founded Jerusalem 3,000 years ago, and his son, King Solomon, built his famous temple there. Instead of statues of pagan deities, there were tablets of the law in the temple, symbolizing ethics and monotheism. Although the building was destroyed, it has been a reference point for the Jews from Roman times to the present day.
70 AD, the Romans captured Jerusalem and plundered Solomon's temple. This is the time when the Jewish population dispersed in period empires, the Persian Empire and the Roman Empire, and this is the period when Jews came to these territories. Hard evidence is a set of gravestones found in the 3rd and 4th century on the territory of Pannonia, of which the oldest, the 3rd century, is being kept in the Jewish Museum, and the one that was found here is kept in the Hungarian National Museum.
The Jewish residents of the province of Pannonia were partly merchants from Rome and partly slaves from the Middle East. Tombstones found in Aquincum, in the north of current Budapest, Shavaria, today Szombathely, and in Komárom, prove the presence of Jews in this territory in ancient times.
This is a 4th century Jewish gravestone found in Aquincum, the Roman district of Budapest, which shows very similar features to other Roman gravestones. There is a couple, there is a sort of architectural framing, an edicule, and gravestone has been erected for their son Benjamin and later for themselves. What is Jewish about it is an inscription that God is one, and a symbol of the Jewish statehood, the menorah, which actually stood in Solomon's temple. Such a visual, sculptural representation contradicts the image ban of Judaism. How could it happen? The reason might be that the Jewish people felt relaxed in the Roman environment and they adopted some elements of Roman culture. Nevertheless, they were proud of their Jewish ancestry, which was expressed in the aforementioned ways.
The Hungarian Jewish Museum on Dohány Street is operated by the Federation of Jewish Communities in Hungary. The museum presenting Jewish lifestyle was established in the 1930s to begin a dialogue with the Christian society. Thanks to its comprehensive Judaic collection, this is one of the richest Jewish museums in Europe. Its permanent collection focuses on Judaica, and temporary exhibitions present works by Jewish artists.
The Hungarian Jewish Museum has a very rich collection from the period of the 3rd century until yesterday. The oldest piece of the collection is a gravestone of a Jewish family found near Esztergom, not far from Budapest, in the 3rd century.
According to the tombstones, there were Jewish places of worship in the Roman province of Pannonia. However, these buildings have been swept away by the storms of history, and we can only rely on written sources.
the bulk of the collection comprises Judaica of modern times. From the Baroque until yesterday, we can find Rimonim, Yadim, Torah shields, Seder plates.
The Roman Empire was a large melting pot of peoples and cultures. Titus, the Roman conqueror, destroyed Jerusalem in 70 AD, and the Jews dispersed over the empire. Jewish merchants and soldiers arrived with the conquering Romans in the territory of today's Transdanubia, which was then Pannonia province of the Roman Empire. The number of Jews increased at the turn of the 2nd and 3rd centuries, when Syrian legions arrived here from the province neighboring the ancient Jewish state.
Jews in the province of Pannonia lived a Roman life. They inhabited houses like that, with an atrium, with all the premises that other Roman citizens have had. It has been even recorded that Jews kept Jupiter statues on the entrance to their houses, which was in a stark contradiction with Judaic traditions. Nevertheless, they stuck to their initial religious and philosophical traditions, as we have seen on the Jewish gravestones, which displayed Jewish symbols. This is the Roman bath of Aquincum. The Romans kept the tradition of bathing. Bathing included also culture, socializing. And Jews are probably the only ethnic group that somehow in this area pursued the culture of bathing in the medieval and early modern period, albeit under the umbrella of religion.
After the fall of the Roman Empire, the Jewish population left the province. In the following centuries, there are no traces of their presence in the territory. It is certain that in the second half of the 11th century, Jewish communities lived in the Carpathian Basin. They lived peacefully in the Kingdom of Hungary and were not threatened by pogroms. They mostly dealt with trade and finance. Jewish immigration from German, Austrian, Czech, and Moravian territories was continual in those centuries.
This is the oldest Jewish site in historic Hungary and one of the oldest in Central Europe. This was once upon a time the Jewish street, now it's called the New Street, Új utca, where Jews and Christians lived side by side. There are two synagogues. On the left-hand side is a little community synagogue built in 1300, and there is a private synagogue on the right-hand side built 50 years later.
The majority of Jewish immigrants were Western or Ashkenazi Jews. However, Sephardi Jews from Southern Europe also lived here. Since the appearance of written royal decrees during the reign of the Arpad dynasty, there has been evidence of the Jewish presence in the territory of Hungary. Their oldest surviving architectural evidence is the medieval Old Synagogue in Sopron.
This is the men's prayer room of the community synagogue in Sopron, which is a typical Gothic synagogue of the period, a single-cell building covered with a 3-bay Gothic ribbed wall. On the eastern wall is the Aron HaKodesh, in the middle is the Bima, and on the western wall there are 3 slots for women who could follow the service.
The still visible oldest synagogue of Hungary is located in Új Street in Sopron. Contrary to its name, Új Street, or New Street, is one of the oldest streets of Sopron. Its original name was Jewish Street, because Jewish families settled here around 1300. First, they built residential houses here. Later, at the beginning of the 14th century, they built the unmatched Old Synagogue. Elizabeth of Luxembourg, the widow queen, created the first ghetto in Sopron in 1440. This was the year when the street's name changed to New Street. The remains of the old synagogues in two late medieval courtyards were excavated and partly reconstructed in 1967. The 50-year younger synagogue, also Gothic, some 50 meters further from the old synagogue, today houses an exhibition which pays tribute to the memory of the deported Jews of Sopron.
This is the private synagogue built in 1350, which was used for a family. Interestingly, it has no women's section. Instead, there is a window through which women could peep in. The synagogue was not used for a long period, as Louis the Great expelled the Jews some 20 years later.
Compared to many period countries, in the Kingdom of Hungary, the anti-Semitic influence of the Christian Church was less pronounced. After the Mongol invasion, the Jews' expertise in crediting was useful during the restoration of the country. In return for their services, Bela IV issued his famous Jewish patent in 1251. The patent provided royal protection for the Jews and was confirmed by successive kings. Anu King Louis the Great withdrew this decree. In the second half of the 15th century, the great Renaissance king Mátyás Corvinus created the office of the Jewish prefect. The prefect represented the Jews' interest and allocated royal taxes among the Jewish communities.
In the medieval period, Jews were not allowed to own real estate. They were not admitted to the guilds, so somehow they were pushed to trade and commerce. And this is the way how they got to money printing. King Mátyás Corvinus, the great Hungarian Renaissance king, had a large Jewish community in which some community members were allowed to print money. Their names, actually the initials of their names, can be found on the coins as Aleph, Fe, for Altman, for Fredman.
A German chronicler recorded that a mounted contingent of Jewish dignitaries was among the cavalry troops celebrating Mátyás and Beatrice's wedding in 1476. According to the chronicle, the Jews rode carrying swords, and their flags displayed the stars of King David. This was the first mention of the Star of David as a symbol of the Jews.
We are at the northern tip of the Buda Castle hill, which consists of two parts: the castle proper, the royal castle, and the burgher city. And the first Jewish settlement in the 14th century was just between the two. The next Jewish settlement is from late medieval period, from the 15th century, just before the Muslim rule. We are in the compound of the medieval Sephardic synagogue of the Buda Castle. The gravestones here stem from the late medieval period and the period of the Ottoman rule. They were found after the siege of Buda in 1686, where all the Jews were expelled from a Buddha. The most touchy funeral monument is this one for Friedel, erected by her husband in 1672, who wrote this eulogy about his pain and about the virtues of the beautiful passed away woman.
In 1964, the ruins of two neighboring medieval synagogues were found in Buda. The smaller and older Sephardi synagogue can be found at 26 Tanchich Mihai Street.
In the late medieval period, there were two synagogues adjacent to each other, this one, the Sephardic, and across the street, the great Ashkenazic synagogue. Sephardim came from Spain. Sfarad in Hebrew means Spain, and they are actually from all over the Mediterranean area. They came in larger numbers during the Turkish rule when the Turkish Empire comprised contemporary Hungary's territory. The Sephard Jews and Ashkenazic Jews have a different service. This is the reason that there were two synagogues adjacent to each other. Now we are going to enter the Sephardic synagogue. We are in the interior of the Sephardic synagogue in Buda Castle, where we have a display of the first Jewish neighborhood from the 13th, 14th century, with the first Ashkenazic synagogue, which was an 8-bay structure that opened to the Jewish gate. This is the Fehérvári gate, gate that led the road to Székesfehérvár, another royal seat. And on the opposite side of the synagogue is the ritual bath under sea, deeply dug into the soil.
Jews could live in peace in Buda, just like in other parts of the Ottoman Empire. Not only was the Star of David, one of the oldest symbols of Jews, drawn on the wall, but also a passage from Hannah's prayer, written in red paint, was found on the ceiling of the Gothic gateway. The Hebrew text's meaning is, "The bows of the warriors are broken, but those who stumbled are armed with strength."
In the interior of the Sephardic synagogue, two wall paintings have been discovered with inscriptions. On the right-hand side, we have a David star. On the left-hand side, we have a bow with Hannah's prayer. This is one of the pillars of the great Ashkenazi synagogue that was in function until 1686, the liberation of Buda Castle. When the Christian troops liberated the castle from the Turks, they slaughtered all the Jews save one family, the Schulhof family, whose offsprings are now scattered in the world. They initiated a restoration of the great synagogue. In the 1960s, the great medieval Ashkenazic synagogue of Buda Castle has been unearthed, and here are the photographs taken during the excavations, and here is the site plan. The synagogue was a two-naved, 8-bay structure, presumably the biggest medieval synagogue in Europe in the period, which is 50% larger than the Stara Božnica in Krakow.
By the middle of the 17th century, the Jewish community in Buda had become significant in Europe. Its culture was flourishing. Many Sephardic Jews came here from other regions of the Ottoman Empire, Istanbul, or even Syria. Jerusalem was also ruled by the Ottomans. Jews lived not only in large towns, but also in the countryside, usually under the protection of their landlords.
In 1686, United Christian forces defeated the Turks, and the Hungarian kingdom, actually under Habsburg rule, became part of the great empire. There were very few Jews at that time, First Jewish families started coming at the beginning of the 18th century. Charles VI ruled that only the first son of a Jewish family is allowed to marry. The rest had to move.
After Buda was reconquered from the Ottomans, Jews were not allowed to move to the Kingdom of Hungary's bigger cities under the reign of the Habsburgs. However, in Óbuda, a state of the Zichy family, Jews enjoyed protection. In return, they conducted trade and looked after the landlord's financial affairs.
We are in the Austrian town of Eisenstadt, formerly in Hungarian Kismarton, at the gate of the Esterházy Palace. The Esterházys were the most prominent Hungarian families who supported, among others, Joseph Haydn. They had also a Jewish community under their protection, the famous ghetto on my right-hand side of Eisenstadt.
Jews were also expelled from Sopron and Kőszeg. They found shelter nearby on properties owned by the Esterházy and Nádasdy families in Mattersburg, Deutschkreuz, and Eisenstadt.
This is Jerusalem Square. After we cross the gate to the ghetto, we are at the Jerusalem Square. The ghetto goes back into 1296. This was the first firm evidence about Jewish presence. And then after the Turkish times, Jews settled, the community was established at 1732. In its heyday, in 1843, it counted 976 Jews.
After the Turkish wars, Ashkenazi Jews settled in the western and eastern borderlands of the desolated country. In 1787, they numbered some 8,000 people.
During of its 250 years existence of the ghetto, Jews changed their status. After the Hungarian uprising and revolution, they became free citizens, so the Esterházys were not the landlords anymore.
The Jewish population dealt with agricultural trade, but was open to modernization. Famous klezmer musicians traveled around the country. They appear in the poems by Mihály Csokonai-Vitéz, the most illustrious Hungarian poet of the era.
We are in the courtyard of the palace of the family Wolf. While theoretically, Jews were of the same rank, practically, some of them still got very rich. And the Wolf family was famous for trading with wine. Burgenland, this province of Austria, is famous for wine growing. The palace has a frontal part on the street, and there is a little private synagogue upstairs with two separate entrances for men and women.
Samson Wertheimer, chief rabbi of Hungary and Moravia, was the most influential person in Eisenstadt. He granted Eugene of Savoy 40,000 forints to support the fight against the Turks. After managing the finances of the Esterházy family for 20 years, in 1696, Prince Paul Esterházy bestowed a castle upon Wertheimer. Here, the chief rabbi established a private synagogue.
This is the private synagogue of Samson Wertheimer, which is unique in that respect that after the Reichskristallnacht, after the Crystal Night, when all the synagogues were set ablaze in the German Reich, already including Austria, in 1938, it remained intact. It was due to the fact that the mayor of Eisenstadt realized the extraordinary art historic value of this edifice. Curiously, after World War II, when the region was largely Judenfrei, this synagogue was well attended by the Russian Jewish soldiers during the occupation from 1945 to 55.
The synagogue was destroyed by fire in 1795, and its reconstruction took more than 30 years. The Wolfs, one of the wealthiest wine merchant families of the region, settled down in the town at the end of the 18th century. The family's rich collection is exhibited for the public in their former home. However, this is another era, the age of Jewish emancipation, which we will address in the next episode of our film.